Look what happened last night in the United States Senate. President Putin and Xi Jinping fly to Uzbekistan, and on the same day they're flying there, this happens in the United States Senate last night. There was a bipartisan support that passed the bill without any dissent, basically. It's a major change to the U.S. position towards Taiwan, and it will funnel billions of dollars in military support to Taiwan. Here's how it reads. I'll read the Dave DeCamp version of this on antiwar.com. Senate panel advances bill that would radically change U.S. Taiwan policy. The Senate Armed Services Committee approved a bill on Wednesday that would radically alter the policy towards Taiwan and significantly escalate tensions with Beijing. The amended version of the Taiwan Policy Act would give Taiwan $6 billion in military aid, give the island the benefits of being a major non-NATO ally, expedite arms sales to Taipei, and require sanctions in the event of Chinese aggression. So, I mean, this is amazing. If the legislation makes it through Congress and it's signed by President Biden, it will be a major overhaul of U.S. policy towards China and Taiwan.
Yes, you think?
Yes, which was defined by the 1979 Taiwan Relations Act. Since 1979, the U.S. hasn't had any formal diplomatic relations with Taipei and China. And they're basically moving away from this towards a major provocation with China. This is a major escalation. This is a knowingly engaged in a significant escalation in aggression, they say. Senator Rand Paul was one of the few who actually voted against it. So all of this is meant to provoke a war with China. The United States deep state desperately wants a war with China for one very important reason: world dominance.
By all accounts, the United States couldn't win a war like that.
Right.
And so the calculation is not necessarily to win, it's to weaken.
To drive down their speed with which they will reach their industrial
with
dominance.
American lives.
The thing is, what people don't understand is China doesn't want a war, and they don't have to do this. China is going to become the world superpower in just a few years without firing a bullet because of their industrial power, and the United States is collapsing. You see this relationship with Putin and Russia and China and Iran and Brazil, and they're doing it without firing a bullet. And it is a dominant position. Also, China is ramping up its nuclear weapon production, not because it wants to use them, but because it gets them a seat at the table. You know, Russia has 6,000 nuclear warheads. China's weapons, like hypersonic missiles and other weapons that the United States can't touch. The United States has really strong nuclear submarines. You'd have to travel thousands of miles to attack China, and they can absorb anything that we throw at them. So this is a clear provocation of trying to keep China down, to try to weaken them or slow their move towards dominant superpower.
Yeah.
So this battle of Taiwan, this coming war, this is where all focus should be. We've said all along that what's going on in Ukraine is just it's like the preamble to all of this. It's important to understand that China is not interested at war with the United States at all. For one very important reason: China is already set to win. They've already set to become the global superpower. So for them to enter a war with the United States, it slows that process down. It slows their speed to dominance down. If they have to now be fighting us in the Taiwan Strait, if they have to be fighting us other places, they don't want to have to do that. That would be a distraction. Think about it. They've been trying to complete their Belt and Road Initiative.
Yeah.
And this would slow that down dramatically. Rail lines, shipping lines in the South Pacific, rail lines and roadways and bridges all through Europe and Asia would be totally slowed down. So just to wrap this up, I want to point you to a RUSI report. Now, RUSI, R-U-S-I, is basically the British version of the RAND Corporation. Fascinating reports. You should read them from time to time because if for nothing else than to see it's a think tank. And they're studying deeply like what is happening in these regions. RUSI published an amazing report on Ukraine. And what it showed was Russia has immense industrial capacity and the United States doesn't. And it showed that America is losing the industrial war. So all of the ammunition that Russia is firing, it takes them about 1 month to produce. It would take the United States 3 years to produce the amount of ammunition that Russia is firing within 1 month. And you remember, President Biden had to fly to Alabama and meet with Raytheon to try to get them to ramp up production on weapons. The industrial capacity of the United States compared to this alliance with Russia and China is damning. To this move, about increasing ties to Taiwan. This was what the Chinese ambassador, warning that increasing U.S. ties with Taiwan could lead to war. So where does this all point to? It does. It leads to war. China's ambassador to the U.S. warned that Washington's increasing support for Taiwan could ultimately lead to a war with the U.S. and China. He said, it's emboldening independence forces in Taiwan. If the Taiwanese authorities, emboldened by the United States, keep going down the road for independence, it most likely will involve China and the United States, the two big countries, in the military conflict. And the death, at the end of the day, the death of the U.S. hegemony. It's also important to point out that the White House was upset or not on board fully with this legislation that the Senate was trying to pass and that did pass. So to me, it's clear that it is the United States deep state that wants this.
Yes.
The military-industrial complex. It is the people. Biden's just a puppet, right? And so if the White House is hesitant because they know this could lead, he's only there for 4 years, right?
Yeah.
Maybe 8 if he somehow miraculously wins a re-election, right? But they know that these elected politicians are gone, and it's those deep state actors in the intelligence community, at the Federal Reserve, and at the military-industrial complex that want this war.
So, Senator Holding, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, good to see you. I appreciated our conversation the other day. Thank you I guess it was just yesterday. Thank you for making time for me. Let's follow up, if we could, on a couple of things we talked about. First of all, Admiral Richard, the current STRATCOM commander, of course, has testified, and you and I talked about this some, that the U.S. needs to think very seriously about the requirements for deterring two major nuclear powers at the same time, China and Russia, of course. And you said the same thing yesterday, which I appreciated. Here's my question. If confirmed, would you commit to having STRATCOM do an analysis of the nuclear force requirements to deter both China and Russia now and into the 2030s?
Senator, thanks for the question, and the answer is absolutely yes. I think that's going to be critical for us. I called it earlier, it's the strategic doctrine within STRATCOM, not necessarily policy. I'm talking about the strategic doctrine within STRATCOM to ensure that we can do exactly what you asked. The other piece of that is then the national objectives from the president to make sure we can meet the national objectives as well.
Very good. Thank you for that. I think that'll be hugely, hugely helpful. I asked Admiral Richard earlier this year about China's ability to engage in limited nuclear employment and whether or not that was growing. He said that it was, and he was very emphatic on this point. And he talked about how important it is for the United States to maintain our own limited nuclear options if we're going to be able to deter China in what is our pacing theater. So let me just ask you, do you agree that we need to be concerned about China resorting to limited nuclear employment in a conflict, let's say, over Taiwan?
Senator, I think any near-peer nuclear adversary, we have to be concerned about that.
Would you agree that having our own limited nuclear options, whether that's low-yield SLBMs or nuclear-armed sea-launched cruise missiles, that having those, maintaining those, can help us deter China's limited nuclear use?
As I described to the committee, for me, it's about being able to give options to the commander-in-chief.
Very good. Are there other limited nuclear options that you think that we ought to be pursuing, whether that's in terms of additional capabilities, whether that's posture changes in order to deter Chinese and Russian limited nuclear use?
Senator, I think that goes along with that study that, if confirmed, taking that really deep study to understand what that outcome and because what I want is success at the end of that. So what that would look like. So if confirmed, that would be part of that study.
Okay, very good. Fair enough. Fair enough. You said to me yesterday, which I appreciated, I'm going to try to make sure I get you quoted correctly, and then we talk about it. If we can prevent China from crossing the Taiwan Strait, and they know that we've got a viable nuclear deterrent, then it's possible that Beijing might not escalate at all. And I thought that was right on the money. I agree with that 100%. And I just want to give you a chance to elaborate on that here, because it sounds to me like what you're saying is the right approach to deterring a Chinese invasion of Taiwan is denial, is to deny them the ability to do that in the first instance, backed up by a very credible nuclear deterrent. So do I have that right? And would you elaborate on why you think that's the right combination?
Senator, I think that the whole reason that we have the strategic deterrence that we have today and the triad that we have today is to ensure that our adversaries understand that today shouldn't be the day for them. So as we were having that conversation, that's what I meant. I think that they would understand that if you have a credible nuclear deterrent, it would make them think twice before engaging with us.
And those two things, the conventional denial combined with the nuclear deterrent, those things have to sit together. Is that fair to say? I mean, they work hand in hand.
They work hand in hand. Conventional and nuclear works hand in hand.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, just on the question of our own nuclear modernization. Given the pace of China and Russia and their modernization, if confirmed, will you be looking for ways to accelerate our nuclear modernization and identify those options for Congress so that we can work together to make sure that we push the pace like we need to?
If confirmed, I would do that, Senator.
Very good. Let me just ask you one final thing here in my remaining seconds. The 2018 Nuclear Posture Review, it highlighted the importance of conventional nuclear integration, which we were just touching on, which of course is critical for strengthening conventional deterrence against adversaries who may use nuclear force for operational or coercive effects. Has the department, in your view, made sufficient progress on the conventional nuclear integration since the 2018 NPR?
I think it has, because in the past we didn't talk about it the way we should have. And I think the integration on being able to talk about going from conventional to nuclear, as opposed to doing a pause X, if you will, and then having that conversation, we've made leaps and bounds in that regard.
Very good. Thank you, General. Thanks again for the conversation yesterday. Thanks for your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.